Hey there, I'm Carrie, and in this video I'm going to be talking about The Conqueror Worm, a poem by Edgar Allan Poe published in 1843. I'm going to read through the poem up front, and then we will go back and take it line by line, look at the vocabulary, break down what this language really means. Then we will look at some of the symbolism, the themes, links to Poe's other work, other things that you might see on a test or in an essay question. I've got timestamps in the video notes, so definitely scroll down, click around, find exactly what it is you need. This poem is by request, so thank you very much to the person who suggested it. And without further ado, let's get into The Conqueror Worm. Lo, 'tis a gala night within the lonesome latter years. An angel throng, bewinged, bedight in veils, and drowned in tears, sit in a theater to see a play of hopes and fears, while the orchestra breathes fitfully the music of the spheres. Mimes in the form of God on high mutter and mumble low, and hither and thither fly, mere puppets they, who come and go at bidding of vast formless things that shift the scenery to and fro, flapping out from their condor wings invisible woe. That motley drama, oh be sure it shall not be forgot, with its phantom chased forevermore by a crowd that sees it not, through a circle that ever returneth into the self-same spot, and much of madness and more of sin and horror the soul of the plot. But see, amid the mimic rout, a crawling shape intrude, a blood-red thing that writhes from out the scenic solitude. It writhes, with mortal pangs the mimes become its food, and seraphs sob at vermin fangs and human gore imbued. Out are the lights, out all, and over each quivering form the curtain, a funeral pall, comes down with the rush of a storm, while the angels, all pallid and wan, uprising, unveiling, affirm that the play is the tragedy man, and its hero, the conqueror worm. Okay, before we go back and look at it line by line, I do want to remind you that Edgar Allan Poe's parents were theater actors, so that is the theater, the drama connection there. Also, several people in his family, including his wife and mother, died of tuberculosis. It was a very common disease in Poe's day. It was a slow death. It was a painful death. So that might be one of the things that inspired both the gruesome aspect of this and the pessimistic outlook that we see here. So keep that in mind as we go back and let's go line by line. Verse 1, Lo, 'tis a gala night. So lo means look, pay attention. Something important is going on here. 'Tis a gala night. A gala is like a big event. It's formal. It's a special night. The lonesome latter years. Latter means later, closer to the end. So this could be the image of a person who is getting older. They're getting closer to the end of their life, their later years. An angel throng, bewinged, bedight in veils, and drowned in tears. Bewinged just means they have wings. Bedight means dressed or decorated. So they're bedight in veils. They're all wearing veils and they're drowned in tears. So this is, we're going to see a tragedy here. They know this is going to be a sad story. Sit in a theater to see a play of hopes and fears. All right, so the stage is set. Everybody sit down, pay attention. The story is about to begin. While the orchestra breathes fitfully the music of the spheres. So fitful means unsteady. It's not a good, reliable rhythm. It's unpredictable. And the orchestra is playing the music of the spheres. So that is an idea relating to the movement of the sun, the moon, the planets. You know, it's the movement of the heavens. And the ancient Greeks actually came up with the idea of relating it to music. It's the music of the universe. And you don't hear it, you sense it, you feel it in your soul, you know, this grand passage of time, this huge show that we're all a part of. He says the orchestra breathes it fitfully, so that could mean that we're only getting glimpses of the grand, glimpses of the majestic and the wonderful. We're not getting a good, clear, steady look at the music of the spheres. Verse 2. Mimes in the form of God on high. So mimes, you frequently see them parodied on TV and in film. They're actors who don't use words. They just use their movement and their facial expression to convey suggestions of what's going on, the feeling of what is going on. So mimes, he says, they're in the form of God on high. So mimes who symbolize people, living human beings, they are playing God. It's just an act. They don't actually have control. Mutter and mumble low. Now, mimes traditionally don't use words, but he gives them words here. It says they mutter and mumble low. You don't hear what they're saying. So their words, even if they're using them, they don't even matter. If you've ever been in a theater where one of the actors wasn't really projecting, you just kind of end up writing off that character. Well, I can't hear what they're saying, so I guess they're not really contributing here. And hither and thither fly. Hither and thither means here and there. They're moving around the stage. Mere puppets, they. So he's saying the actors, the mimes, they don't even control their own movements. They're puppets. You get the image of the marionettes, and the puppeteer is holding the strings and moving them around the stage. They have no control. Who come and go at bidding of vast formless things that shift the scenery to and fro. So they are taking orders, they're getting their bidding. They're taking orders from something that they can't see. It's something vast and formless. It's an undefined force that is pulling the strings here, that is moving things around. It also says these vast formless things shift the scenery to and fro. Now, in the theater, when you are shifting the scenery, that means you are changing the location, you're changing the circumstances, changing the character's environment. So it's saying something that they can't even see, they can't even name it, is changing their environment and changing the circumstances. The actors, the stagehands have no control over what is going on here. Flapping out from their condor wings, invisible woe. Woe, this is an older spelling of our word woe, W-O-E. It means sorrow, bad things that happen. So whatever these things are that are moving the actors around and shifting the circumstances, changing the scenery, they are spreading woe with their wings. They're sending out bad things. They're sending out sorrow and disaster from their wings. It specifically says these are condor wings. So a condor is a very large bird. They've got like a 9 or 10 foot wingspan. They're huge, but they are in the same family with the vulture. So they're scavenger birds. They're carrion birds. They prefer to eat things that are already dead. So just like vultures, they have a strong association with death. Verse 3. That motley drama, oh, be sure it shall not be forgot. So motley has two different meanings. It can mean that it can mean something that's varied, like a variety, all shapes and sizes. So if we looked at the actors, the mimes, as symbolic of humanity, that could mean people of all walks of life. It doesn't matter where you're from, who you are, what your environment or circumstances are. We all end up on this journey together. We all end up at the same place. Motley can also refer to the traditional costume of a court jester. And this word motley also shows up in The Cask of Amontillado, one of Edgar Allan Poe's short stories. Now, in that story, the character who is wearing motley, who's wearing the jester's costume, is made a fool of. He is made to look like an idiot at the hands of the main character. So that could also say the actors symbolizing humans, we're all going to be made fools of. With its phantom chased forevermore by a crowd that sees it not. So phantom means something that is imaginary. So we've got this image of the crowd of actors chasing after something that they never catch. So if we look at that in the context of humanity and life, it's saying they're all chasing something that's imaginary. Maybe it's power, maybe it's control, youth, happiness. We don't really know, but they are spending their entire lives chasing something that isn't really there, and they never can catch it. Through a circle that ever returneth into the self-same spot. Self-same means the exact same. They are running and running, but they're only going in a circle. They're not making any progress. That's the idea of meaninglessness again. And much of madness and more of sin and horror the soul of the plot. So again, there's that pessimism about life, just terrible things happening again and again. This could also reference, the terrible things that people do trying to catch that phantom, whatever they are seeking, whether it be more time, like youth, happiness, control. They do crazy things, or they do evil things or horrible things trying to catch hold of that thing that they're chasing, and it doesn't work. Verse 4, but see amid the mimic rout, a crawling shape intrude. So mimic copies something else. It imitates something else, or it echoes it. It happens over and over and over. Rout means a total defeat. If you read historical fiction, it talks about the army was routed. It means the army was obliterated. They were blown out of the water by a loss that was so bad they couldn't even retreat. No purpose, no order, nothing was left of them. So it's saying, the mimes, the actors, they're defeated completely over and over again. And that is the full action of this play, is people, humanity being beaten time and time again. A crawling shape intrude. Intrude means you push in unexpectedly. You're unwanted. You're messing up the plan. You're not supposed to be there. So something has crawled in. A blood red thing that writhes from out the scenic solitude. So it comes out of nowhere. It comes out of the scenery. No one was expecting it. It writhes, it writhes. So writhe means like a twisting, uncontrollable motion, uncontrolled movement. So it's describing a worm, the movement it takes as it progresses along. With mortal pangs, the mimes become its food. So mortal in this context means dying. It means fatal. So these are their dying pains. The mimes become its food. So they are being devoured by the worm. And seraphs sob at vermin fangs. So seraphs are angels. Remember, are angels that are watching from the gallery, watching from the audience. They sob at vermin fangs. Vermin is something gross. It's something unwanted. Fangs, of course, are teeth. In human gore imbued. Human gore means like human blood, viscera, entrails. So the fangs, the teeth of the worms are covered in human blood. Imbued means full of something, covered, permeated. Verse 5. Out are the lights, out all. So the play is done, performance is over, everybody go home. And over each quivering form, the curtain, a funeral pall. Each quivering form, those are the actors, the mimes that are down on stage. And the curtain is their funeral pall. A pall is a cloth that you would spread over a coffin. So the curtain is coming down and it's like a funeral shroud. It's covering their bodies. The curtain comes down with the rush of a storm. So it comes down unexpectedly. It's frightening. It's overwhelming. But there could also be like a touch of realism here. Stage curtains are extremely heavy. Very, very thick, heavy duty cloth. And the curtains that drop onto the stage, you don't want to be in the way when they fall because they're moving pretty forcefully there. So the curtains are loud and they're unexpected and frightening in this context. While the angels, remember the angels are watching all this, all pallid and wan. So pallid and wan both mean pale, but not like naturally fair-skinned pale. They mean unhealthy, like a sickly complexion. Uprising, unveiling. So they're standing up, they're getting out of their seats, they're starting to move around. Unveiling, remember in the first verse, they're bedight with veils, they're all wearing veils, and now they are taking them off. So we kind of get the image of them leaving a funeral here. That's a solemn occasion. People who are mourning might wear a veil. You've seen hats with veils sometimes. Or in some religions, a very solemn occasion, you might wear a veil into the church or the temple and take it off afterwards. Affirm that the play is the tragedy Man. So that is the name of the play. Man is the name of the play. Humankind is what the play is about. And its hero, the conqueror worm. So even though the play is about people, they're the main character, the hero, the winner, the only one who ends up happy, getting what they want, are the worms. They are the conquerors. So yeah, so cheerful. All right, so let's take a closer look at a few of the images here. As I mentioned, Poe's parents were actors, so there's the theater connection. But this isn't just a play. There are actually mentions of several different theater forms in here, so let's go through and take a closer look at those. So in the first verse, it says, "We sit in a theater to see a play of hopes and fears." So they're gathering to witness a story. Theaters like the Globe in London, the Shakespeare Theater in London, on performance days, back in the 15 and 1600s, they would raise a different colored flag over the theater depending on if it was a tragedy or comedy. So the people knew what they were getting when they walked in. Are we gonna laugh or are we gonna cry? Also in the first verse, we've got the orchestra. There might be music accompanying a play back in Poe's day, but this could also be a reference to opera theater or ballet theater. Those were well-established forms by the time that Poe was alive, and they all incorporate scenery, costumes, and a story. Going to verse 2, of course, we already talked about how mimes, that is a form of theater. Classically trained actors today are frequently trained in miming as part of their education. Also in verse 2, we have mere puppets. Puppet theater is still alive and well. Sesame Street, the Muppets, Avenue Q. Also in verse 2, it talks about these vast formless things that are shifting the scenery around. So moving the scenery, changing the set is a constant conundrum in the theater. They want to change the scene, change the background without taking too long and without the audience disconnecting from the action on stage. They do want to kind of maintain that fourth wall. They want to maintain the illusion a little bit. The fact that we've got the set moving quietly, instantly, without anyone seeing the stagehands, that's a very creepy image in a lot of ways. In verse 3, it mentions motley. We talked about how that's a traditional court jester costume, and we may not think of court jesters as part of the theater tradition, but a lot of our modern comedy can be traced back to the court jester tradition, stuff like stand-up comedy, improv comedy, sketch comedy. All of that owes a lot to court jesters and pantomime and related forms. Then in verse 5, we have it that the play is the tragedy man. Think of Shakespearean tragedy or Greek tragedy, plays like Julius Caesar or Oedipus Rex. A tragedy is a play in which the main character does everything they can. They overcome obstacles, they strive, they try to do things correctly, they try to get things right, and in the end, it all comes to nothing, and somebody else is the victor. Somebody else is the hero here. So we've got humankind as the protagonist, and no matter what they do, it all comes to nothing because the hero, the winner, is the worm. So let's also look at links to some of Edgar Allan Poe's other work. So this is written in this very similar form to Annabel Lee and The Haunted Palace. Some of the text, the vast formless things in verse 2 is actually very similar to some language from The Haunted Palace, so you might want to compare the two. And another thing those two have in common is they were both featured in short stories. So The Haunted Palace is from The Fall of the House of Usher, and The Conqueror Worm was actually included in Ligeia, which is one of Poe's other short stories. Now, it was actually incorporated into that story a few years after it was written, so it was not originally part of Ligeia. Also, all three of those poems, Annabel Lee, Haunted Palace, Conqueror Worm, they all mention seraphs, which are angels, generally thought to be very powerful angels. But in all three of those cases, the angels aren't doing anything to help. They're kind of sitting on the sidelines, just observing all of this. All three of them have a very pessimistic tone, a very pessimistic outlook on life. Even when things go good, they're gonna go bad at some point, unexpectedly. Let's also look at birds. So in verse 2, we've got the condor wings. Now, we talked about how condors are scavenger birds, and these scavenger birds show up in other parts of Edgar Allan Poe. In The Telltale Heart, the image of a vulture is a very key element in the story. And of course, in the poem, The Raven, there is a raven that plays a big part. All three of those birds, condors, vultures, ravens, also crows, they're part of that group of scavenger birds, those birds of prey that really prefer to let somebody else do the hunting for them. And so whenever one of those birds shows up in literature or in film or in fine art, it's usually a symbol of death or something bad is coming, and the idea that the bird can sense it, and that's why the birds are there. We've also got the ominous passage of time in here. Time is very menacing. It's very frightening. So in the first verse, we have the music of the spheres that is the orchestra breathes it fitfully. So we've got this grand passage of time, the movement of the planets, the movement of the heavens, but we don't get to be in awe of it. You only get little glimpses of the great majestic thing. Then in verse 3, we have the circle that ever returneth in to the self same spot. So that can be the changing of the day or the changing of the seasons, that the circle of life, things just keep going, but it's also the image of a clock where the hands come around in a perfect circle back to the exact same place. And clock imagery is also very common in Poe. It shows up in the Telltale Heart, in the Pit and the Pendulum, and the Masque of the Red Death. The clock is typically tied to the struggle for control, that need to eliminate fear or uncertainty or anxiety. In several of his stories, especially the Masque of the Red Death, explores the strange things or the terrible things that people do trying to slow down the clock, maintain the grip on time, trying to shut out reality and that forward march of time. All right, that's about all I've got on the Conqueror worm. I hope something in there was helpful to you. If it was, please like and subscribe and turn on notifications so you know when the next story or poem becomes available. Again, this poem was by request, so thank you very much to the person who recommended it. If you had a different poem in mind or a particular author that you're interested in, drop that in the comments and I will see what I can do. Best of luck to you, and I'll see you in the next chapter.